Hey guys and girls, welcome back. Board now, back with Rachel Macdonald, and it's going to be another list video. This time we return to TV lists. So this will be our top 10 TV villains. And for those of you who follow the channel, you will know we recently did our top 10 movie villains. So that's a nice sort of companion piece. You can check that out now on the channel. Also, a while back, last year, we did our top 10 like horror villains, like horror movie villains. Was this a hard list for you to do?
No, this was a very easy list for me to do because I love TV villains. So the hard thing was confining it down and also figuring out who works as like an actual villain and who's more just an antagonist. Because there were a few names I wanted to put on this list where I was like, oh, are they an actual outright villain or are they more just an antagonist? But once I finally got my top 10, then putting them in order was the hard part, trying to figure out who I loved most to least. What about you? How did you go with this list?
This was quite tough. I had a few names and similar to some of the stuff you were saying, because a lot of my picks don't actually fit into, like the pure malevolent evil type that you might see in certain genre type shows. Like, I think there's definitely borderline with some of my picks, whether you would say they are outright villains, because some of my picks, like, they are actually like the protagonist of the show, or at least one of them, and they're obviously the characters you follow along. So up to a point, even though they don't always do the most likable things, you sort of have to be with them up to a point. But there's definitely an argument to be made for them being at least anti sort of heroes, but possibly then they are on the more murky side where sometimes it's really hard to defend what they're doing. And like my number one, I think definitely fits into that. But also, also just characters where over time they become more villainous. Like when they start off in the show, you wouldn't necessarily see them as a villain at all. Like you would maybe have more sympathy or just not see them that way. But then sort of part of their arc is then they become more of a villain. And
there are a few on mine that started as villains, but do get a little bit of a redemption, or the very least get the implication that they can be redeemed. And I do have at least one that is a protagonist, or at least becomes a protagonist. But villain protagonist is a trope. You know, you can have a show that has a protagonist that is technically the villain. Then the morality of the show then follows that person. So I definitely understand like having a protagonist as a villain. But yeah, no, I mean, mine are very much villains. Like all of the ones on my list very much start their shows as villains. Like you would say, absolutely, this is a villain. But some of them do move into maybe anti-villain territory or become anti-heroes. A few of them on my list were given kind of redemption. So it will be interesting. Now, I'm interested to see if we have any crossover because, again, I think this is an area where we might not because it's a broader.
It's possible.
It's broader. There is at least one on my list that I'm thinking will either be on your list or might get an honorable mention, possibly a second one on my list that might be on yours. So it will be interesting to see because I'm actually quite curious. I'm not sure who you're going to have on your list. We haven't really discussed TV villains that much. So
that's true.
There's a couple of shows that I'm like, I wonder if this show will pop up, but I don't know who from the show you might choose as the villain. So yeah, I think this will be very interesting. What about you? Are there any crossovers you think we might have?
Maybe one. Yeah, I've got one in mind that I've got, which you might have. So Rachel, what is your number 10?
All right, so I'm kicking off this list with an ultimate mean girl as my number 10 villain. So number 10 for me is Alison De Laurentiis from the original Pretty Little Liars. So Alison is basically the TV Regina George. Now, Regina George was on my top favorite movie villains. I love a mean girl archetype, especially because I know how vicious teenage girls can be. Alison De Laurentiis in Pretty Little Liars was one of the most vicious, psychopathic, mean girls I have ever seen. She is probably the mean girl that other mean girls run away from. She was played so well by Sasha Peters is her name. She was only 14 when she first got the role, and she makes Allison so charismatic and so insanely evil. She has that air of you can completely understand why the girls are so drawn to her, even though she's such a horrible person, because she has that charisma and that effervescence and that basically that she is able to make them feel like they want to belong to her, so to speak. And she collects these girls. You know, she even talks about at one point that they're like all different and all hers. They kind of belong to her. And the way she plays with these girls' lives is insane. For a 15-year-old character, she is insanely smart. She goes after teenagers, she goes after adults, she goes after basically anyone who stands in her way. She causes absolute damage wherever she goes. There are characters in the show that actually develop mental illnesses because Allison is so cruel and so evil, and she is just so much fun to watch. Now, the reason she's only number 10, even though I love her so much, is because the show does, unfortunately, hand her a really sloppy redemption arc, which, quite frankly, I think was a big mistake. Allison, in my opinion, should have been the original main villain. So anyone who knows vaguely about Pretty Little Liars knows that there is a big villain called A who stalks the girls. And every few seasons, we get a reveal as to who A is. And I always thought that Allison would end up being the main big A at the end of the series, but because she is in the books that the series is based on, but they end up just kind of whitewashing her character and reducing her to kind of a shell of her former self. So she would be higher if she had remained the main villain throughout, because she is so brilliant. But because they gave her such a sloppy redemption and kind of diluted her character so much, that's why she only makes number 10. But she is a brilliant villain. She's brilliantly played, charismatic, evil, causes so much damage and never looks back. So that is my number 10, the ultimate mean girl, Alison De Laurentiis from Pretty Little Liars.
I've seen it, so I can't comment, but yeah, obviously the mean girl character, when you get it right, can be very entertaining, very good to watch. And I like that there's some like link between that and your movie list as well. That's cool. So that's nice. My number 10, Aaron from Veronica Mars.
Oh, very nice.
Echols, the father of the rich or bad boy of Veronica Mars, Logan Echols. The character everyone sort of loves to hate, and who actually has a nice little arc and becomes a much more likable, sympathetic over the course of that show. But so that's him. And when you see what a monster his father is, especially with the reveal at the end of season 1, the way Logan is at times it's not surprising. You know, in many ways he's a product of his father. There's been a lot of pressure on him growing up. There's a lot of bullying at times from his father, especially. But this is the thing. I mean, when you start off watching Veronica Mars in that first season, Aaron Echols just comes off as a bit of a goof. Just this, you know, he's like Hollywood type. He's been in a lot of like cheesy style action. Dismiss him as this guy is harmless, really. He's just like a shallow idiot. And that's part of the comedy, which is one of the things. There are other sides to the characters that you see over the course of, because there is like at times there's a little bit of humanity and a nicer side that creeps through, but you know, I think a lot of the times it is masking the darkness that's lurking underneath and who he really is. But some of the scenes with Logan, like when Logan's like embarrassed him in one particular episode, you just see what a nasty piece of work Aaron is, and how he like takes Logan aside and not only humiliates him, but like he actually does like physically beat him as well with a belt. And that's quite an uncomfortable scene to like just think about, because you don't actually see him doing it, but you know what's happening. But it's the fact that in a lot of times he is this sort of like shadow, sort of like cheesy goofball that he's hiding the darkness. He's hiding, and it's obviously the reveal, which is a good reveal at the end of that first season, that actually shows why this guy is such a slime bag and true monster. And fair play to the actor, he plays it really well, because he plays the other stuff effectively, like the more comedic style stuff with him. But when he has to be nasty, and when that Fisher side has to come out, he really is. He's very he's very chilling. He's got a nasty sort of like streak to him.
Yeah.
Where you just get the impression, to save his own skin, if things hit the fan, he's gonna like turn up the heat and just, you know, do anything, potentially kill someone to like save himself. And he also, I mean, at the end of season 2, where they sort of conclude his plot, like he's very sort of slimy and vindictive towards the end of that season. He thinks he's gotten away with everything. I mean, he's very sort of unbearable to be around then, because he's so pleased with himself and he's got of this, and definitely one of those guys who uses like his power and privilege for like bad things. You also see the effect it has on his wife as well, not just his son. So but one of the reasons I went for him is because of he's one of those bad guys, one of those villains where you don't see it coming. You know, a lot of times
that's very true.
You at least know what you're dealing with. You at least know up front that this is someone that can't be trusted, or you better watch him. But this guy you would just dismiss. That's my number 10, is Aaron Echols.
Yeah, no, that's a great choice. I mean, Aaron Echols, I totally agree with what you're saying about how Harry Hamlin plays him so that you don't understand, like, you don't really see how bad he is until the season progresses. Like, obviously, you see that he is violent with Logan, which is not a great option, but that you don't immediately jump from, you know, hitting your kid to, like, you know, murdering bastards. So I think for me, the scene that really kind of emphasized that there's something else going on with Aaron is the scene where he beats up Lily's boyfriend to L'Amour, you know, the Italian song. And as he's beating him up, he just kind of turns to Logan casually and is all like, "Logan, how's school?" And it's like, oh, someone who can switch from that to that so quickly. Yeah, definitely. And I do think Harry Hamlin plays the character so well because, it's kind of like he can switch from like, you know, just kind of a shallow Hollywood star to like a really menacing bad guy that you actually get scared when there's a scene in season 2 where Veronica's stuck in an elevator alone with him, and you actually do genuinely feel a little bit of fear for her. So, no, that's a great choice. I mean, Veronica Mars, that first season is so good. And one of the reasons is because they have that villain in Aaron Echols. So, definitely that's a really good choice. I really like that one. All right, so my number 9 is a character from a show that I know that we both love, a great, fantastic villain, and that is Benjamin Linus from Lost. So Ben is just a fantastic villain. I mean, everything about the way Michael Emerson plays this character. I mean, obviously with Lost, a lot of the show is unraveling the mystery. So anytime you meet a new character, you're never quite sure if this character is a good character or a bad character. So I like that when we first meet Ben Linus, you know, it's under the pretense of him pretending to be someone else. And he's obviously trying to get information on the Losties. And then as the show slowly unravels, you see that no, he actually is like quite a bad guy. He's the leader of the others. And as the show goes on, you get more and more about his backstory. But I think Ben is just one of those villains that is so brilliant. You know, he always has a plan. He's always a few steps ahead of everyone. He's got his fingers in like a million different pies. You know, he's always got something going on. But I also think with Ben, as with all the characters in Lost, we get a really good backstory with him, and we get to see where he's come from, and we get to see how he ended up on the island and what exactly happened to him in his past that has made him the way he is. And I think with Ben, there's also that great thread of like, he always wants to be the chosen one. Like, he has a big arc which concerns like him being the keeper of the island and talking to the character of Jacob, who is obviously, you know, a big mythical figure in Lost. And I just think that that just adds so much to him and allows you to sympathize with him a little bit while also appreciating him for the evil bastard that he is. I absolutely love that if he's breathing, he is lying. Like, even like little things that don't even matter, he will lie about, because that is just his natural state of being. And it's just so funny, some of the lies he tells, when it's like, dude, you didn't even have to lie in this situation. Why are you making shit up? And when you see the hold and the control that he has over his people, and the way he can wield fear, and the way he can manipulate and push pieces into place, like, he just, like, the whole time you're watching Lost, you're just waiting for whatever Ben Linus is going to do next. He is so much fun to watch, and he's one of those characters that I think a little bit like Harry Hamlin. He can play Ben as like goofy and, you know, innocuous, and so you kind of underestimate him. And then the switch just flicks and you can see, no, this dude, you do not mess with this guy. And of course, he does have some humanizing moments. Obviously, later on in the series, there's a whole thread about him sacrificing, you know, his daughter, and you know, learning that some things are more important in life. And I absolutely love his story in The Flash Sideways in season 6, where we see in the afterlife he's starting to make amends. So this is one of the characters I talked about that does get a bit of a redemption. You know, Ben, by the end of Lost, Ben is not so much the bad guy anymore as he's just kind of an antagonist. But the fact that he, you know, he's just so brilliant. He just sees through everyone. He reads people so well, and he's just so much fun to watch. So that's my number 9, Ben Linus from Lost.
Top 3 for me in Lost characters. The actor is so good at playing him.
Yes.
And what, like you said, when he's introduced, and that whole drama of, is he like innocent? Is he just like, yeah, or is he hiding something? That whole, it's credit to the writing. Then you are on the fence. Like, I personally sway towards he probably is a villain, but it was certainly on the fence the way they played it, and it was so satisfying to watch that whole thing slowly play out. And
absolutely.
Just to see how the other characters reacted to him as well. Like, some of them were like, yeah, can this guy be trusted? Others were a bit more sympathetic. And it's just fun seeing that character that stirs up that debate with like main characters, and like the back and forth, and him reacting to, and just slowly how you start to see, then, yeah, this guy probably is a villain. There's just certain things in his like performance, certain things the character's doing. I mean, he has that great line, doesn't he, at the end of a scene or something, where he's like, is there any milk or something? Like,
he's just kind of innocuous. He's great. And he's so good at messing with people as well, you know, like, he really knows how to get under the character's skin, and it's fantastic to watch. So yeah, no, I love him. I've loved him ever since I watched Lost. Just a great character.
Yeah, so he's probably a bit like what I said about John Locke in a previous video, where he just has that X factor, and I mean, sometimes you just love to hate him, but also it's just whenever he's in a scene, you know something's
up.
Happen, and the whole back and forth with him and Locke is so great as well.
Yes, the great dynamic.
I really love them as a pair, and so there's some great stuff. So 9 is Kilgrave from Jessica Jones.
Kilgrave. Oh my god. Yeah.
Played by David Tennant from the first season. Right up there for Marvel villains in general, because generally speaking, Marvel have a very patchy record on villains on
Yeah.
screen. So this is one that definitely stands out. Tennant plays him so well. Tennant's a good actor. He obviously has a lot of charisma and a presence, but he probably does need to play villains a lot more based on this. He probably doesn't play villains quite enough, considering the amount of fun he has with this, how twisted he makes the character, how intimidating. There's a genuine, like, misogynistic tone to the character. Holy shit, we're in different clothes. What's this?
And your face seems to have lost. I think we've time traveled a little bit.
What the hell happened? It's like an episode of The Twilight Zone or something.
Just mixing it up for everyone, keeping you on your toes.
I ran into the bathroom just to shave in the middle of the video. That's what happened, and changed my clothes and everything.
Yeah. Well, we're keeping it fresh, people.
Okay, so before the time jump, I was talking about lovely Kilgrave, played by lovely David Tennant. And that's part of the thing, is I think he is a lovely person from what I can understand in real life. But one of the things I was talking about, because it's my number 9, is how, in a way, I wish he played villains more often. And you can see that in his performance. I think he's relishing playing a villain, playing sort of the dark, nasty side of David Tennant in a way, like very misogynistic, very sort of twisted, has a lot of fun with the role. He's very charismatic. He's obviously, in case you don't know, his core power is that he can, mind control people. That's his big power, which he uses to devastate, in effect, in the show, because that's one of those powers where, depending on how the writers handle it, it can either be really cheesy and silly, or it can be like really dark. And obviously they get it just about right, and the way that it explores the possibilities of it. And there's just a great back and forth between him and Jessica Jones. He feels like a proper sort of foe and rival to her, where there's obviously a nice little backstory. There's a connection between them in the past, which I think adds a lot to it as well. But so when Jessica Jones eventually beats him, it feels like a big deal. It feels like it was one hell of a fight to overcome him, and it really pushes her to her limits. And whenever you have a TV show like Villain, and it's sort of a big bad style villain over the course of the season, the antagonist of the show has to sort of eventually up a game and find a way to like overcome him. But yeah, I think it's a great character, and I think it's a great role for Tennant. It's sort of up there with his best roles, really. I mean, probably you're looking at this and Doctor Who as maybe his 2 standout roles. So it's a really chill and villain. Very well played by Tennant. So that's my number 9.
Oh, Kilgrave he is a villain that, for me, he was just a little too realistic, which is really funny given that his power is mind control, which is something that doesn't exist. But the blatant misogyny and rape culture that surrounded Kilgrave, his abuse of Jessica and his sexual assault of Jessica, for me, was so real and hit so close to home, because there are so many men in the world who are actually like Kilgrave that, for me, he was just so real that I couldn't really treat him as like a fantasy villain or like a fictional villain, even though he is one. Yeah, he was just too much for me. Like, the first season of Jessica Jones is brilliant. Like, it is so good, and the characterization is so good. And Jessica's journey to overcome Kilgrave, as you said, is like really good. But I have only ever watched it once because I just found it so triggering. So I definitely understand having Kilgrave on a list, like, because he is a fantastic villain. But for me, he was too real. So I couldn't even love to hate him. He would just make my skin crawl. And I think it really speaks to how well David Tennant played that role, that he could evoke, such intense feelings. But while I totally understand having him on the list and enjoying Jessica Jones season 1, for me, it was just, it was too much. But definitely a great pick, because he is a truly, like you said, chilling villain and just really evil. And I'd never seen David Tennant in anything like that before. So seeing him like that was just like, wow, like a whole different side to that actor. So great
Bit of
choice.
a
But
revelation. Critiques sometimes aimed at comic books, especially past ones, that they are very masculine, or not, they're sort of getting off on those elements type thing.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that's something which I don't want to say for sure because I've not read the comics, but I think that's something which obviously the show gets right. It knows.
Definitely.
And in many ways, it's very much a feminist show because of
Oh, it is. It really is. Like, it's very well portrayed, and Jessica's flow, like the way she has to get out from under his control and gain her own power back, and all of that. That's the storyline that many women will be able to identify with. It's so real, I think, for some. But I think that does show what a good job they did with it. That they did like a really, really decent job of portraying this kind of abusive relationship. And they just had two great actors who just really portrayed it well. So no, definitely a great choice. It is from a universe that I know that you don't watch. It is from the Vampire Diaries universe. I have gone with the hybrid Klaus Michelson, who is the big villain of season 2 and 3 of the Vampire Diaries, and then is spun off into his own show. So for anyone who's watched the Vampire Diaries, every season has a new villain. And Klaus is, so basically in the world, you have vampires, you have werewolves, and Klaus is one of the original vampires. So these are the first ever made vampires. But Klaus himself is also a werewolf. So he is a hybrid. He is a werewolf and a vampire. And he has the best build-up almost of any villain I've seen like on this show. All of season 2 is used to build him up, and everyone that the characters come in contact with who has met Klaus just trembles in fear. So you get this idea that this guy, he is going to cause some real damage when he turns up. So the villain from season 1 actually turns out to be terrified of Klaus. So when you see this villain that everyone has already been scared of and worried about is actually scared of a bigger villain, it just builds him up that much more. And when he finally arrives, it is fantastic. The actor who plays him, Joseph Morgan, is one of the most charismatic actors I've come across. He just has this instant charm that makes you just love everything that Klaus does. And the best thing is he completely lives up to his hype because he ends up winning at the end of season 2. They don't defeat him. He gets exactly what he wants. He kills a main character, and then he goes on to be this massive threat in season 3. So there's great build-up, there's great payoff. Then when they spin him off onto his own show, he's still kind of a villain protagonist. You're not supposed to root for him. He is the protagonist, but he's also still like really evil. But the originals gives us a great backstory. It gives us vampire families, which I absolutely love, and Klaus is right in the center of this really messed up, twisted, semi-incestuous vampire family that have been around for like 1,000 years, and just him as the centerpiece, so much fun. He is awesomely powerful. There are quite a few fight scenes where he takes on dozens and dozens of people and just wipes the floor with them all. So it's just always a lot of fun to watch him wreak havoc, to see people try to go up against him. He's actually really clever. He's always like 2 steps ahead of everyone, always has a plan, always thinking. He's also completely diabolical. There is an instance where you find out that he turned an entire family into vampires just because the father pissed him off. So he just went and just did that just because he could. Yeah, I mean, The Vampire Diaries has a lot to answer for as a TV show, but they do produce great villains, and Klaus Michelson is definitely one of the best. So he is my number 8, the original hybrid Klaus.
Number 8, which is a character we've both talked about before and who we both really enjoy, is Dr. Kimberly Shaw from Melrose Place. Love Kimberly Shaw. And one thing which Melrose Place shows is that it's actually quite fun and entertaining to be a doctor, because Michael Mancini, the other, well, one of the other big villains of that show, is also a doctor. And I considered him because there's a lot of scenes I enjoy with Michael. He's a very entertaining slimy douchebag. But I went with Shaw, I think, partly because I love Marcia Cross so much. Her performance really elevates that character. And I think her character just goes to more extreme places than Mancini at times. So I think that's why I gave the edge to Kimberly Shaw. Introduced, like, she's just a work colleague of Michael's, and they just do like a very typical soapy plot where there's an attraction and they give into it and they start seeing each other, and he's obviously married, so that leads to the breakup of his marriage. So against the typical soap sort of like plot, because at the start of the show, like, Mancini wasn't a villain, he was just a typical everyday sort of guy, and much more boring for it. And in a way, Shaw started off like that. She was just an everyday sort of person. So the fact that they actually, as soon as they were officially together, to actually turn them into like this Bonnie and Clyde style couple was so brilliant and so entertaining. Great chemistry, obviously very broken sort of relationship, which is a car crash to watch at times, but very entertaining. yeah, literally. And they obviously, in their own ways, they love each other. But as I said, I went with Kimberly over Michael just because of the bizarre nature of her character. I think she's obviously very psychologically damaged, and the actress plays that so well. Like, she's really convincing as that. And just some of the great, like, water cooler moments of Melrose Place concerns her. Like, she's involved in my favourite cliffhanger ending, which is the one where she sets the detonators, like, in the apartment building. I think is it the end of season 3? It's either 3 or 4.
I believe it's season 3.
I think it's 3, yeah. And yeah, you've just got everyone crowded around, and she obviously, I can't remember what the line is, but she makes it clear that she's about to like detonate the building, and that's the cliffhanger at the end of the season. And it just one of those great soap moments where all the characters who have like been involved in her life and she's got like issues with are right there, and that's her whole plan. But it's a really sort of varied character where she gets to be very sexy, she gets to be very like aggressive and nasty. She also has more tender humor moments, and just some of the most weird and messed up storylines on Melrose Place. Obviously, the stuff with the imaginary guy in her head.
Yes.
What the fuck was that? That was crazy. You obviously had the stuff with the face, you know, the disfigured sort of face, that famous scene in the mirror.
With the wig,
but Marcia Cross is just so great, and she plays her so well, and it's just one of the most charismatic characters on the whole show, and one of the most unique, and a very entertaining villain. She really knows how to be sort of badass and nasty in a fun way. So that's Dr. Kimberly Shaw.
Excellent choice. I had a feeling she'd be on your list somewhere, because we have obviously spoken about Melrose Place before, and she is really a great villain. Just one of the great 90s TV villains. Like you said, a lot of the water cooler moments definitely came from Kimberly. The wig moment, one of the biggest moments, I think, in 90s TV. So yes, definitely on board with that. It's a great choice. So my number 7 is a bit of a tragic villain from one of my favorite early 2000 shows, and that is Lex Luthor from Smallville. So Smallville, I watched when I was younger. I absolutely loved the retelling of young Clark Kent. And one of the reasons I loved it so much was the portrayal of Lex Luthor, who, as most people would know, even if you haven't watched Smallville, in Smallville, they change up the mythology and make it that Lex and Clark are actually best friends. They become best friends early in the series. And over the seasons, we see the slow decline of Lex Luthor. And it is just such a great villain origin story, because, of course, his storyline runs parallel to Clark's. As we see Clark become Superman, we see Lex become the evil Lex Luthor. And I think one of the best things about this portrayal is it really humanizes Lex, and it really shows you that he struggles. He has a darkness inside of him. He's got his father, you know, Lionel Luther, I almost put on this list too, because he is a great villain as well in Smallville. And you see the moral like struggle that Lex goes through in trying to be a good guy, but he also has this really dark side to him that makes him experiment on like the media freaks. breaks and hide secrets from Clark and try to find out what Clark's secret is. Michael Rosenbaum is fantastic in the role, just really embodies the character, is just really charismatic, and also really makes you feel for Lex, because we get a lot of revelations about Lex's childhood, about his relationship with his father, his relationship with his mother. There's a lot of tragedy in his life, and there's a lot of moments over this series where you can see him at a crossroads, you know, and if he just took this turn, maybe things would have turned out differently. You also see a lot of like the people around him and how they shaped him. Clark's constant secrecy. There's a big argument that Stephen and I have a lot, which is if Clark had just told Lex the truth, would Lex have become evil still? Like the show really sets up this whole, like it was a choice, you know, even though Lex had the darkness in him the whole time, he definitely made these choices. And from about season 5 is when you really start to see the darker side of Lex come out. So we get these beautiful first 4 seasons, which establish the character and let us know, you know, his ups and downs and his strengths and weaknesses. And then we slowly see the descent into him becoming the unforgivable villain that everyone really knows him as. And in the later seasons, he really has some despicable moments, but they've built such a strong foundation for the character that even when it comes to like these horrible moments, you can still understand what his motivations are. You can still see what's driven him to do this. Even as you want him to reform and become good again, you understand exactly why he's not. And I could literally write entire essays about Lex Luthor, and I probably will at some point for my channel, because he is such a great character. There is so much to dive into with his backstory, with his motivations. He's so sympathetic and at the same time so despicable at times. I just love watching him, and every time I rewatch Smallville, his arc is the part that I really enjoy. It's one of the things I enjoy the most because it's just so tragic. And it's kind of like when you watch Titanic and every time you watch, you think maybe the ship won't hit the iceberg this time. So every time you watch Smallville, you're like, maybe this time Lex won't become evil, but he ultimately does. And I think that's the real tragedy, is you see this good person corrupted by evil and there's nothing you can do to stop it. And that's just the real tragedy, I think, of Lex. So
Smallville and Titanic mentioned in the same sentence. I never thought I would live to see that. That's quite something. Good things about him in the show. A lot of people shit on the show. I mean, it tends to divide people. It obviously has its niche sort of audience and was very popular at the time, but I think even people who don't like the show normally praise his performance.
yes,
I've heard
yeah.
that. So okay, that's fair enough. Right, my number 7, I'm sticking in the 90s with this one. Character out of the X-Files, and that is Agent Alex Krycek. Have you heard of this guy?
The cigarette smoking man?
No,
Okay,
not.
different. Then no, I haven't heard of this one.
Okay, I mean, if you think about the cigarette smoking man, he's sort of like the superior not the superior, sorry, whatever you call like the underneath sort of guy, the one who almost does his bidding sort of thing.
Oh, okay, like his underling kind of.
Yeah. That I'll go with that, but. Yeah, I mean, the actor is an interesting example because he's a Canadian actor who was little known before the X-Files. Nicholas Lear play him. Lee, it's either Lear or Lee, but he plays him, and he was one of those actors who they was in an earlier episode, like season 1, and he played a different role, and I guess maybe they liked him enough to bring him back in a different part and make him like a more regular character.
Okay.
So he appears at the start of season 2.
Oh, yeah, I know who he is.
Yeah, you can see him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when obviously the X-Files had been disbanded, Mulder and Scully were separate, a storyline they did because of Gillian Anderson's pregnancy.
Yeah.
That's why they did that storyline. Well, they put this character with Mulder. He was his new partner, this Alex Krycek. So the actor, first of all, is a really great actor. He's very natural. He's got a great look about him. and he's got a good range. He's very sort of understated when he needs to be, but he plays slimy very well, like everyday sort of slimy, but with a little bit of a charisma to him. But yeah, there's a great intrigue to his character where, because he saddles up to Mulder, and he sort of, it's funny you just mentioned Smallville, because his appearance in the X-Files is very sort of Clark Kent, and they went for that type on purpose because they made him look like this wet behind the ears sort of like rookie who was saying he looked up to Mulder to get Mulder on his side, where he says, because like there's some amusing scenes with Mulder just giving him a cold shoulder, like Mulder's like, because Mulder just wants to do it on his own, and obviously there's this whole thing where he's missing Scully, and if Scully can't be his partner, he don't want anybody else. So there's this whole thing where like he just says, okay, go and get the car sort of things. And so when he goes off to do that, like Mulder just like sneaks off sort of thing, like get the taxi sort of thing, and just ditches him. But yeah, Krychek will use that. He says, you know, I wanted this. I was a fan of yours, but yeah, it turns out he's an informant. He's been planted by cigarette smoking man and the hires up. But he's such an impressive like character and has a great presence to him. Then they made it quite a long recurring role where he obviously wasn't in every episode, but he was in a number of episodes, expanding quite a lot. And so there was good intrigue to him about what exactly this guy is. And it's obviously interesting with X-Files because there's a lot of good villains and there's some standout, obviously, one-shot villains. But I think I went with this guy because he is just that little bit more sneaky and slimy and at times wimpy. I mean, he does have a vicious streak. So I think there's this sense that he can take care of himself. But it's once again this thing of, you know, sometimes those are the people you have to watch out for the most. The people, and they sort of fade into the background and they act like everyday sort of guys. And this is the sort of guy you could see just going for a drink with, but that's when he gets you off guard. So he's not a typical monster, or he's not a typical, like, he looks like a shady character, like the cigarette smoking man. So yeah, I went with Krychek. I mean, I really like that actor. I really like the character and the interactions with Mulder. There's some great stuff between the two of them, and yeah, in many ways, considering some of the praise which other characters get, I sort of like to fly the flag for him as quite an underrated character too. So that's Alex Krychek.
Very cool. No, I always like, you know, picks that are like underrated characters that, because, you know, the X-Files, I obviously haven't watched, I've only seen a little bit of season 1, but I do know, you know, a bit about the monsters and the conspiracy and the government and stuff. So there seems to be, you know, quite a few big villains and obviously the monster of the week. So it's nice when you showcase a villain who maybe might be a little bit overlooked or underappreciated. So I'll have to keep an eye out for when I do watch the X-Files, because it definitely is on my list. But given how long it is and how involved it is, I need to be in the right frame of mind before I start watching it. All right, so at my number 6, we have a crossover. Our first crossover. So at number 6, I have the lovely Dr. Kimberly Shaw. So of course, she had to be on my list as well, because as you mentioned, I mean, you covered most of it. Such a great character, so entertaining. Marsha Cross is just fantastic. I mean, I watched Desperate Housewives before I really watched Melrose Place, because I didn't really watch Melrose Place in the 90s. I was too young. So I knew Marsha more as Bree Vanderkamp. So watching her as Kimberly Shaw was the most fun, because you really got to see her kind of push a different character and, you know, play this kind of insanely nutty, crazy character. And like you said, she started out quite a average character, but once she came back from the dead is when things start to get like really good. And yeah, that wig scene, fantastic. Just everything about Kimberly. She's so psychotic and so nuts. And that weird, twisted dynamic that she has with Michael is just bizarre. I mean, there's that scene where he figures out that she tried to kill him, and they run outside, and she's like in the car, and she's gonna like run him over again or something, and he's like, all right, just do it. And instead of running him over, she gets out of the car and they start having sex, and it's like, okay, sure, she tried to murder you 2 seconds ago, but I mean, this seems like a good time for a hookup. So there's just so much crazy stuff. Like you said, the explosion cliffhanger, one of the best cliffhangers, when she runs out, and I think she says something like, oh, it's not what you think, and then she's like, it's so much worse.
That's
And then
it.
she
Yeah,
and then
like
she
that.
presses the detonator. Then she has that whole storyline, I think in season 4, where she takes on that weird crazy housewife persona.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but just everything she does is just, so much fun. She is just so batshit crazy. I always love a good female villain. And yeah, I think you covered most of it. So I'll just say that I love Kimberly Shaw. And yes, she is my number 6, Dr. Kimberly Shaw from Melrose Place.
Serial killer.
Ooh.
And it's a character which comes from Dexter, and it comes from the best season of Dexter, which is from season 4, and it is Arthur Mitchell, aka the Trinity Killer, who's played by the excellent John Lithgow.
I thought that was the one that you were talking about.
Yeah, this is
I know of
obviously
that. Yeah,
one of the best known villains on Dexter, if not the best known. The Trinity Killer, because there's 3 incidents from his past involving people that he lost. And so you sort of see that as a pattern. So right there, that's something which makes him stand out as a serial killer, because there is a bit of a theme to him and to his backstory. So yeah, introduced in season 4, the season sort of villain, if you like, and a tremendous cat and mouse between him and Dexter. So obviously, speaking about the actor, because Lithgow is such a great actor, and it's one of those things, because he's obviously done a lot of different sorts of roles. He's had a very varied career, but I don't know if he'd ever played a serial killer before, or a character this disturbed. Big sort of comic role on TV previously in Third Rock from the Sun. And so sometimes when people see him in that and then see him in Dexter, they're like, okay, this is something. I mean, is it the same guy? But the genius is he actually brings a similar sensibility to both. It's just it's twisted depending on the sort of character he is. And so I think in this case, it's almost that idea of something which maybe someone like Robin Williams did in his sort of more darker, dramatic roles, where he just takes the quirky, weird Robin Williams type comic persona and then just turns it into something more nasty type thing. And that's why the performance works. So you've got this classic serial killer where on the surface of things, he has a very neat family life, preaching good old American Pie family values, Christian sort of values, and that's almost like this front for what is a very like damaged sort of family. It's like this pretension of this perfect family sort of guy, and that's always something that's very satisfying when you have a villain leading a double life. But slowly, as like Dexter starts getting under his skin, and Trinity does start to crack, and the effect on his family starts to show. But it's such a chilling performance by Lithgow, and there's so many facets to the character, so much depth. I mean, there's stuff with his victims where he's in this mindset where he's sort of loving them at the same time as he's killing them, because he sort of puts exactly, it's very unsettling, but he sort of like he wraps his arms around them when they're in the bathtub. So it's almost like starts off as this affectionate type like gesture, which then goes too far. It's almost like he loves them too much, so he like squeezes them, like chokes them to death. But Lithgow is absolutely terrifying, and it's obviously a big thing for, to play off against Dexter, because they have a great rivalry, great cat and mouse. And Dexter was one of those sorts of shows where if you had a good season villain and if you had a good foe for the Dexter character, it went a very long way to, making it a good season of Dexter. Lithgow really elevated that season. Dexter is pretty much the latest season suck. And it should have ended at season 4. Season 4 was the perfect way to end Dexter. If you see the ending and
I actually do think I know which scene you're talking about. Yeah, and the symmetry of the scenes and what happened to Dexter as a child.
In the past, the final scene makes sense, and that would have been the end of the show. And it's a tremendous gut punch, because basically it's Trinity's last act, because he's been taken out by Dexter, but there's one last gut punch.
One last blow.
It's like he left his legacy even after he's been killed. So that is such a gut punch of an ending. But yeah, John Lithgow, he's just amazing in that role, and definitely stands out. In a show which overall I have mixed feelings on, but that season I think always holds up as my favourite season, and Trinity Killer is a great villain.
Very good. I haven't watched Dexter, but I do know about the Trinity Killer. When you live on Tumblr like I do, you get a lot of spoilers to a lot of shows that you don't watch. So I do know all about that. Funnily enough, John Lithgow, the first thing I ever saw him in, he was playing a villain. Mind you, it was a very mild villain. It was this Santa Claus movie I had from the late 90s, and he played some evil toy maker who wanted to send Santa out of business. It was really funny. But then obviously after that, I mostly just knew him.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you do. It's hilarious. And then obviously I knew him just from Third Rock. So when I found out that he was playing a serial killer on Dexter, I remember thinking, wow, John Lithgow. And then I had the thought of the similar kind of Robin Williams thought, which was but if he applies his comedic skills to being a serial killer, that could be really interesting. So Dexter is one of those shows that I will get around to watching eventually, but it does have some storylines and stuff that I'm not too keen on. So I'm I might stay away from it. Eventually, I think I'll at least watch the first 4 seasons and then maybe see where I go from there, because I have heard very good things about the first 4 seasons and, about the acting and about, the storylines and everything. So it's definitely one that I'll have to check out at some point. And I would love to see John Lithgow play a really creepy serial killer. I think that could be very interesting. 5 villain is from the Buffyverse, so it's one that you can appreciate. So coming in at number 5 for me is the magnificent hell god herself, Glorificus, aka Glory. Glory has been my favorite Buffy villain pretty much since she first walked on the scene. First of all, she has one of my favorite villain entrances of all time. Of course, when we first meet Glory, we don't really know what she is. We just see these monk people running around going, oh my God, the beast is coming. And they're terrified. And oh my God, what is happening? And then there's this big metal door. And we see this door being pounded. And then it just flies off its hinges. And in walks this tiny little blonde thing in this gorgeous dress with these high heels, and it's Claire Kramer. Now, Claire Kramer does tend to play variations of Glory in every role that she plays. Any role you see her in, she's almost always playing the bitchy, glamorous chick. But I feel like Glory was really gave her a chance to kind of stretch her acting skills a bit, because she is so good in this role. Because Glory as a character is crazy. She's a hell god trapped inside a human's body, which is making her insane. She has to brain suck people to stay sane. And I think that Claire Kramer really balances that kind of bitchy, nasty, mean girl persona that Glory has with the crazy hell god persona. She's fabulous Like, I absolutely love the fact that she loves high-end designers and she lives in this big swanky place, and she's like, she loves luxury and she takes her bubble baths with her mimosas. I also love the visual of Buffy fighting someone who looks like her. I think Glory creates a very interesting parallel to Buffy, and it's really interesting. It's almost like Buffy is fighting a shadow version of herself, you know, as she says, "I'm tired of tiny little chicks with superpowers who aren't me." You know, and Glory is just so much fun. I also think that the season that she's in, season 5 of Buffy, I think is one of the strongest seasons of the show, if not the strongest season. It's got a great arc, and I think the Glory arc tied to Dawn as the key, and their introduction together, and the way the mystery unfolds over season 5, and you find out the mythology behind Glory, and you find out where she came from, how she was exiled from a hell dimension, and she kind of needs the key to go home. I think that that entire season is just worked so well. There are some like downsides, like the snake that she conjures to find Dawn is a little iffy, and you know, there's a couple of episodes here and there where it's like, okay, you're dropping the ball a bit. But I think overall Glory is just such an imposing villain. I think sticking her in the body of a human in it was a great way to show why she is contained at times, because Glory runs the risk of almost being too powerful. And when she's too powerful, you're like, well, why doesn't she just take out the Slayer? Then you realize that, well, she can't, because she's trapped in this meat suit, which, you know, limits her movements, limits her sanity. And I think that's just a really, you know, it's a really great twist on, you know, why this person who is so overpowered can't take out Buffy. And only big bad that Buffy actually runs from. Buffy is amazing. She takes on everyone, right? And she's always got a plan, and she's always ready to go up against whatever is coming against her. Even when she had to fight Angel, you know, when he lost his soul, she still managed to do that. But Glory is so powerful and so intimidating, and she leaves Buffy feeling so helpless that Buffy runs away from her. And I think that is just a mark of how strong a villain Glory really is. The fact that Buffy almost gives up in the face of her, which makes her defeat over Glory at the end that much better when they do rally and they do go to fight Dawn and they do have that final showdown with Glory, you know, because she has been such a big threat for the entire season. It's really satisfying to see Buffy finally go toe-to-toe with her and kind of triumph and take out on her all of the misery that she's put Buffy through for the season. Other than that, you know, it's just so much fun watching Claire Kramer. I think she's such a fun villain. I think she's obviously having a lot of fun in the role. I think she's having, you know, a great time swanning around, being able to be this fantabulous, you know, hell god. I love her minions. Her minions are so funny. They are just with their little sycophantic sucking up and all of the different names they give her, like your scrumptiousness and your effervescent shiningness, and like all of that is just fantastic. So yeah, Glory's a great villain. She's in a great season with a great arc, and I just think that she really is the best Buffy villain out there, and I will love her forever. So that's my number 5, good old Glorificus.
Big fan of Glory. I'm a big fan of season 5 as well. So yeah, more discussion on this in future videos, because we're obviously going to be covering Buffy. A Buffy versus villain for number 5 as well. Richard Wilkins III from season 3 of Buffy. I absolutely love the charisma of this guy, the charisma that the actor brings to the role. I love his role as the mayor, you know, this sort of central figure in the town, where it almost plays into one of the main metaphors of the show. Then this is a guy who, on the face of it, is a very like charming sort of politician. Once again, similar to some of the stuff I talked about with my last pick, but he presents himself as a wholesome sort of family values sort of guy. There's a lot of fun played with that. But then obviously the darkness lurking underneath, and a tremendous performance by the actor, because the trick to the performance is then you believe so many different things from him, and it's impressive then a character who's so grounded and who so much of his charm is like the charisma and the little sort of one-liners, the little sort of like jokes, and just the way he phrases things. He has like a very like unique dialogue of his own. But yet, when he has to be serious, like the sort of threat, the darkness can come out of nowhere, where just through the tone of his voice, I mean, it's one of those characters where he's not going to be someone who like rants and raves, but
No.
he can just scare you through like a tonal change in his voice. You know, like some of the ways at some certain points he talks to like people like his like second hand man Alan, or the way he'll talk to Mr. Trick, and where he just gives them a little bit of a telling off, where he's like, well, yeah, don't let that happen again, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But he just has for such a reserved sort of laid back sort of guy, he has a very like scary sort of way of telling them. How early it's planted in the show, where he's actually mentioned back in season 2.
Yes.
And
yeah.
It's actually like a crucial part to what's going on in Sunnydale, and the role of the school and the role of Principal Snyder in the whole thing, where he's someone who actually knows a lot more than he's letting on. So
Yeah.
I sort of like this
Bit of a conspiracy going on.
Yeah, like underneath the sort of surface type thing.
Yeah.
And it's obviously one of the good things about the show. Then you do have people who are like in official positions who are like the crooks as well. It's not just the supernatural like enemy, own set of tools to try and corrupt things and to try and, you know, go up against Buffy and the gang. But at the same time, you know, the mayor, there's a humanity to him. You know, obviously, one of the cornerstones is his relationship with Faith and their chemistry, and how he becomes like the father figure she never had, and just like legitimately cares about her. There's no doubt.
He really does. Yeah, I love their relationship because of that.
Yeah, because it's not just something where he sort of needs her to serve a purpose.
No.
Like, there's natural human relationship there between them. So, and he just gets her, and there's so many cute moments, like the miniature golf moment.
Yes, I love that.
Which is so good. And he just knows how to make her laugh when she needs to laugh and be a bit more laid back. And it's he's a tremendous character, tremendous actor. He has a nice little arc over the course of the season, and obviously whenever he reappears in like later seasons for certain reasons, which I won't go into, but he always makes an impression there. And I think just the depth of the character and the way the actor plays him, he's one of them. Also, I really love the scene in, I think it's Choices, isn't it? Like the episode with like the box and those like weird sort of creatures, and the speech he gives to Angel and Buffy about
that's a hard one to watch.
Well, it is, and obviously he's doing it partly as the villain, but I also like, he has a point. That's
he does.
A lot of times that's a great trait as a villain.
Yes.
You may be saying it partly for your own purposes, but I think he believes it as well. You know, I think he does have a point, and obviously later on the characters have to address that than they have. So it just adds this layer to him as well, because it's almost like he's been there as well, you know.
Yeah.
Because he's lived for like hundreds of years, and as he points out, seen his like loved one die. So yeah, great character.
Great choice. I thought about putting the mayor on my list because he is such a great villain. I think after Glory, he's probably my favorite villain. Stephen loves him. Stephen has always loved the mayor. And again, it's because he presents that kind of wholesome family guy, but then he'll also cut your head off if, you know, if you wrong him. And I love that Harry Groening can do that duality. You know, he really can show both like the goofy guy who's all like, let's go play miniature golf, or the guy who says to Giles, I'm going to eat Buffy. You know, like there's that line where he's all like, that's one spunky little girl you've raised, I'm going to eat her. And it's like, whoa, okay, let's back up a little bit. But his relationship with Faith, I have always loved. Like, I always point to the fact that when she fights Buffy and she's taken to the hospital, he literally puts preparations for the Ascension, something he's been working on for a century, on hold to find her. And it's like, that's not just that's like actual love, you know. I know he's evil, and I know that he definitely does manipulate her sometimes, but he also gave Faith something that she'd been wanting ever since she arrived in Sunnydale, which was acceptance. And I love Faith as a character. So for me, seeing her get that from someone was very good and validating, and like, yes, she needs this. If only she'd gotten it from the right people, you know, like maybe the guy who's going to turn into a giant snake is not the person you want to as a parental figure, but you know, you take what you can get. Plus I love when he's in snake form, his final words when he sees all of the thing is just, well, gosh. And it's like,
that does
that's the
sound
reaction
like
that the mayor would have.
Like said when he dies,
So that's a fantastic choice. No, I do like that lines up that both our number 5 are from the Buffyverse.
Yeah, there's some coincidence.
That's very...
If I ever get a chance to meet him at a convention, then take that chance, because he's
Have you met him?
Yeah, Vampire
That is
Ball
so cool.
He's such a nice guy, but also such an interesting guy, because he's had this amazing career where he's been on stage, he's been on like TV shows, like lots of like classic shows, films as well. So he's kind of done it all, really. He's had a great career. So
that's so cool.
Interesting guy too. Yeah.
Oh, that's very, very cool. That's so cool that you got to meet him. Awesome. All right. So my number 4 is from a TV show that I know you don't watch, but I've been encouraging you to watch. And everyone should watch this. It's not Scrubs. Don't worry, Keith.
I was going to say there's not villains.
Scrubs doesn't really have villains. No. My number 4 is Princess Azula from Avatar: The Last Airbender. So Avatar is a great show. It is, isn't it? Avatar. Stephen made me watch this a few years ago, and I absolutely fell in love with this series. And Azula is a villain who arrives in season 2. So she basically is the princess of the Fire Nation, and the Fire Nation are the bad guys in this movie. In this series, they are at war with the other 3 nations: the Air Nation, the Water Nation, and the Earth Nation. Azula has basically been sent out after her father first banished her brother and sent him on a useless quest to go and find the Avatar. When he failed at that, Azula was sent to bring him to justice and also to find the Avatar. The interesting thing about Azula is, again, she's a very tragic villain. She's very young. She's only 14. All of the characters in Avatar are young, but she's only 14 years old, and she's basically been left by herself with her father, who is a complete psychopath and has basically just molded her into like a little mini psychopath and made her incredibly sycophantic and incredibly like she has this massive desire to prove herself to her father, to prove that she can be the bad guy. She has this unrelenting quest for perfection. One of the first things you see her in is she's practicing her fire bending, and she's actually practicing lightning bending. And she makes the blow, and her trainers are like, almost perfect, one hair out of place. And she literally has one hair, and that's enough to send her like, oh no, I didn't do it right. So you see the pressure that she's under. She's also hilarious. She is a really funny character. Her voice actor has actually done a lot of voices. So she's like a seasoned voice actor, and she really gives Azula this charisma and this fun edge because, you know, again, she's only 14. So at one point she decides that she needs an elite army to help her bring down her cousin and her uncle. And her elite army turns out to be her 2 best friends from school, who, granted, are awesome. But it's so fun to see this little girl gang kind of run around the show and, you know, kind of be girl bosses. Azula, again, she's very clever, very ruthless, and she's definitely got a cruel streak. Like, you definitely see her do some things and take some actions that are like, whoa, girl, if you're only 14 and you're already able to do this kind of shit, like, God knows where you'll end up. But by the same token, you can really see how much she is a product of her upbringing. Both her and her brother Zuko, their father is just kind of the absolute worst. Like, I mean, he's running a war, so that right there should tell you something. But he's even worse than that. He's definitely abusive towards both his children. And you see both the kids kind of wear the scars of that abuse. And with Azula, it comes out in cruelty and malice and trying to be bigger and better and more cruel than her father is. And it all kind of culminates in this villainous breakdown in season 3, in the final season, where you really see the weight of what she's been carrying and the way that she views her interpersonal relationships, and how when they start to fracture, she feels deep betrayal and she feels deep hurt, and she just basically ends up completely alone, kind of nuts. She doesn't die by the end of a series. She's just taken down. And I think the series does continue in comic book form. I don't really read that, but I do think that they have extended her character in the comic books, and I'm hoping that they've given her a bit of a redemption, because again, she's so young, she's only 14, and there's definitely a glimpse of, if she'd had the right people around her, and if she'd had the right people leading her and like teaching her, she may have turned out differently. But because she was left with a psycho, with her father, for like 3 years, with no other kind of like adult presence, you can see how she's been twisted into this evil kind of sycophantic little firebender. But you just really wish that things could have been different, and that maybe she could have gotten the same kind of redemption that her brother gets in the series. So I love a good female villain, I love a good tragic villain, and Azula like encompasses both. So anyone who hasn't watched Avatar, I would definitely recommend it. Great characters across the board, and Azula is just one of my favorites. So it's my number 4 villain, Azula from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah, that's a good shout. It's one I need to catch up on. So
Yes.
it's on the list to see for sure. Okay,
Good.
so good stuff. Okay, so my number 4, if I just say the name Bob, do you know who I'm talking about?
Bob?
Just Bob.
No,
I think
don't.
sometimes he's known as the guy from the other place as well, but it's Bob from Twin Peaks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I sort of went for him. There's obviously like some really great villains in general in Twin Peaks. One which is an honourable mention, which is a slight spoiler for the return, but is like Doppel Cooper, which is the darkest, like other half of Cooper. There's actually a dark version of Cooper, sort of thing, which Carl McClaxton plays so well. So such a symbol of Twin Peaks and the darkness lurking beneath the surface of Twin Peaks. So, in case you don't know, in a way, he like this person doesn't really exist, but he's the sort of character that appears. And I don't know if I should give away, just in case you've not seen it and don't know who killed Laura Palmer. But,
I do actually. I haven't seen it, but I do know who killed Laura Palmer.
Yeah, okay. But I know it's over 30 years. But for the sake of people who haven't seen the show and don't want that big reveal spoil, I actually won't say, but I'll just say the person who killed Laura Palmer, Bob appears to this person in their head and controls them. But that character of Bob and that actor, he only got cast on the show. He was a set designer on the show. So initially he wasn't an actor on the show. And it's just when they were setting up a scene one day, Lynch saw him in the back of a shot, and he just, very Lynchian, he just had this random idea that he would be great to be in the show and to play this part. And what I love is that they actually used that in one of the scenes, like one of the big scenes, because it's a similar sort of thing in the scene where Laura Palmer's mother, Sarah, just sees this guy in the back of the shot, like the back of the scene. It's a very iconic look. He has a very sort of gothic look in some ways. He has like long sort of like draping sort of like white hair.
Yeah. I can see. I've got some images up here. I can see what you mean.
It's scary, and but yeah, he's a real presence. And as far as I know, the guy had never acted before, but the way he presented in the show, he does have this real menace to him. Very sort of scary, very weird Lynchian style character, and a very evil laugh, which is appropriate. Also which again fits some of what Twin Peaks is going for. He does have a very throwback style look to a lot of his wardrobe. Like he wears a lot of like denim sort of thing, and so he does have even though he's this weird sort of oddball character that you wouldn't necessarily said was like appealing or sexy, he does have a bit of a style to him as well, a bit of that bad boy style look. So yeah, interesting look, really chilling. As I said, I don't think he had acted before, so considering that, he's really impressive. And there's definitely a few villains I could have picked, but I think because he is so iconic and such a big part of the Twin Peaks world, and as I said, the motivations or the actions that led to Laura's death, obviously it's a very bizarre Twin Peaks type thing. Then in a way he had the most to do with it without physically sort of doing it. But yeah, really scary character and guy, and leaves a mark all these years later. And it says something because unfortunately the actor died back in the 90s, so he wasn't part of the recent revival, but Lynch did like use older footage to incorporate him in the revival, which was obviously fitting to do. But yeah, definitely leaves his mark on Twin Peaks. So that's Bob. Yeah.
3 comes from a fandom that I have already mentioned during this list. I'm going back to Pretty Little Liars, and my number 3 is the original A, Mona Vandewell. So anyone who's watched Pretty Little Liars, as I mentioned before, you have 3 reveals over who A is. And the first one was Mona, and she was the best A reveal in the entire series. So for the first 2 seasons, obviously you're not supposed to know who A is, but they're constantly, running circles around the girls and getting them into all sorts of trouble. And during those 2 seasons, Mona is a character in the series. She is one of the best friends of the Liars. She's Hannah's best friend. And basically all you really know about Mona is that she's a little bit vapid, a little bit kind of like season 1 Cordelia. She kind of just hangs around on the periphery. You don't really notice her that much. You do know that in the past she was called Loser Mona by Alison, that she was very badly bullied by Alison. And then you get the reveal that she was A. And once you get that reveal and you look back over the first 2 seasons, so many things fall into place. So many things suddenly make sense. So many actions taken towards the girls. So many things about how did A know this? How did A get to this place? How did A find this out? Well, when you find out that it's Mona, someone who was so close to the girls anyway, to one of the girls, suddenly everything is like just revealed. And that's why Mona as A worked so well, because the writers actually planned for her to be A, and so they drop all these little clues so that when you rewatch the first 2 seasons and you see Mona hanging around, suddenly it creates this whole new layer, and it just is so brilliant. And then after the A reveal, they go on to have a lot of fun with Mona's character. So Janelle Parrish, who plays her so well, and she gets to play so many different sides of her, because we get to see Loser Mona from before Alison died, then we see It Girl Mona, then we see Crazy Radley Mona. Basically, she gets locked up in a mental asylum, and oh boy, does she play the crazy well. Like, she's obviously putting it on a bit, like the character herself, but it's just so fun and eerie to watch. And Mona kind of sticks around for the rest of the series. She's one of those characters that kind of always knows what's going on. If the girls, like, once the girls find out she's A, she kind of moves into frenemy territory. They go to her if they need information, but they don't always fully trust her. But she's so clever. She always knows what's going on. She's always got her fingers in a million different pies. She's one of those characters that's just really sharp, really on the ball, and she definitely helps the liars as she becomes more of an ally, but there's always a little bit of an edge to her, and she is one of the few characters that actually ends the series in a really fun way, and a way that's very true to her characterization, and just kind of makes everything that much funnier and that much better. She essentially ends up kidnapping two people at the end of the series and holding them hostage in a dollhouse, and it makes sense in context, kind of, but it really works for the character because she does have a running theme of playing with dolls, and these are her dolls and these are the people that she's going to mess with. And she's got this whole mindset of like people as playthings. So people, they're not people to her. They're just things that she can manipulate and move around. And it's just really fun to watch her. So because she was such a well-planned villain, like Pretty Little Liars after season 2 kind of is on a steady downhill until it ends up completely in the dumpster and is just a trash fire by the end of the show. But those first 2 seasons, because they were so well planned, the reveal of Mona as A is just so good. It just makes her such a good villain. And she's definitely one of the more memorable aspects of that show, when pretty much everyone just remembers it as like a dumpster fire now. We can still remember that Mona was a great original villain. So that's my number 3, Mona Vandewell from the original Pretty Little Liars.
The line villain, and a lot of people might disagree with her being a villain, but I'm going to have to make my case. And a big reason is where she sort of develops and sort of ends up in the last season. But my number 3 is Rachel Goldberg from the show Unreal.
You've talked to me about this show. Yes,
I have talked. The Marty Noxon show, which is also co-produced by one of the former producers of the reality dating show The Bachelor. So I think we'll talk more about the show in the future, but the basic premise is that it is on the set of a reality dating style show, which is modelled on the real show The Bachelor. And it follows like the inner workings of that show, and particularly the producers and just the various schemes they come up with to try and keep like the show cutting edge and to keep the ratings coming in, and the way they try to manipulate things. And you get like rivalries between like the various producers who are each assigned to like one of the potential like people who the suitor is going to pick. So a cynic of reality TV, like this is the perfect show for you, because like I think the people who write and produce the show have the same contempt for reality TV as I do, but at the same time there's stuff to enjoy if you do enjoy reality TV. Like, they make it a very entertaining show. But so Rachel Goldberg, is played by Cherie Appleby, who before this was better known from Roswell High as the lead in Roswell High.
Yes.
Liz, one of the leads anyway. And so she plays Rachel Goldberg, who is this very fragile, at times fragile, very disturbed sort of producer of the show. And now what's interesting is, for a lot of the show, the real villain for many people would be the other lead in the show, which is Quinn, who's like the boss, like the main producer on the actual set, played by Kirsten Zimmer, who's very good in it. So for a lot of the show, she actually seems more the driving force. You know, there's a lot of times where the producers, no matter how ambitious they are, they'll be pretty shocked by the things that Quinn comes up with or comes out with, and there'll be moments of hesitation, and Quinn will be like the one forcing it, just justifying it, say no, this is our job, this is what we're here to do, sort of thing, no matter what. So the evolution of Rachel as a character is very interesting because of alcohol problems. She has a very unstable past, which is explored over the course of like the 4 seasons of the show. So at times, although she is very hard to be around and can be very shallow and unlikable at times, goes to dark places, does a lot of underhanded, very sneaky things where she'll say one thing to someone's face and then sort of pull the rug out from them, always using a certain thing to like manipulate a situation. This, for a lot of the show, there is still moments of humanity, moments where you're more sympathetic, but it's worth remembering, if you've seen the pilot of the show, there's a twist at the end of the pilot with Rachel where it's actually revealed and she is, she is this more underhanded sort of character. But that's the twist of the pilot. Then for a lot of the pilot, she actually comes across as she's just there doing her job, basically, trying to do the best she can with her job. But then it's sort of a reveal at the end of that pilot that she's been working people the whole sort of episode. So when you think of her as a villain, maybe you have to remember that and what the pilot sets up in the final season. And that is the season where they actually go full-blown villain with Rachel, where there's a power struggle between her and Quinn. They have a very interesting relationship, almost like a mother-daughter style relationship, where, as tragic as it may be at times, they're sort of the only consistent people in each other's lives, sort of thing. It's a very interesting, it's a very interesting dynamic. And I mean, the show certainly makes them very engaging as characters, even though they're not the most likable. But in some ways, Rachel, as the true villain of the show, really comes to the forefront in that final season. And that final season is absolutely tremendous. There'll be episodes that you have to get through where it's very tough because they go to some really dark places in that final season, and some of the stuff that Rachel does in that final season will make you absolutely disgusted. But it's worth it. It's worth it because of the way the season ends and the payoffs, and it's a very dramatic, very tense show. That's one thing to say, to go along with a lot of the satire of the show, the actual drama and the tension that the show has at times, and sort of twists and turns. And it's also a lot of fun to watch the producers and the rivalries trying to one up each other. But Rachel's a great character. She's a very complex character, and Sheree Appleby is just great in the role because it's one of those where, like, she's perfectly good in Roswell. She fits that character very well. But if you said in years' time she would have had this sort of performance and role, you wouldn't have quite bought it, seeing that performance coming from her. And once again, it's probably similar to what we talked about with certain other picks, where it's the opposite of the Roswell role, where she's playing this sweeter, girl next door type. And in Unreal, she really gets to show her nasty side and be quite bad. But there's a lot of layers to the character, as I said, a lot of complexity. But she's just tremendous. She really plays a lot of very difficult sides of the character very well, and once again just has enough of the human side, just enough of the sympathetic side, then you don't completely lose it with the character. But she's really good in the role, and it's a great character. A lot to talk about with that character.
Watching that show at some point, and and then I can have a look at that. But a villain protagonist is always fun, or even just an anti-hero, or someone who's a bit morally grey. So once we watch the show, we can have a discussion as to whether or not she's how far of a villain she goes. But that definitely sounds interesting. Very cool. Okay, so my number 2 is, again, I'm going to a fandom that I have already mentioned. We're going back to the Vampire Diaries. My number 2 is the wonderful Katerina Petrova, aka Catherine Pierce. So the main character of the Vampire Diaries is Elena Gilbert, and it turns out that she is a mystical doppelganger of Katerina Petrova, who was a doppelganger back in the 1500s and is running from Klaus, who I have mentioned. Now, Katerina, or Catherine, is just a magnificent bitch. She is literally always 10 steps ahead of everyone else. As with Klaus, she gets a really good build-up in season 1. We get a great build-up where we find her background with the 2 main vampire brothers, with Stefan and Damon, the Salvatores. We find out that she's actually responsible for turning them into vampires. And then we find out her whole backstory, what she did in the past to piss off Klaus, how he slaughtered her entire family, how she's been running from him. Catherine is one of those characters that will literally throw everyone under the bus in order to survive. She always has this mantra of better you die than I. She is incredibly self-serving and incredibly, like, she has got such a sense of survival that she will literally do anything to anyone to make sure that she continues to live. She's played by Nina Dobrev, who does also play Elena, the main character. And I don't know if it was just a difference in the writing in the character, because as Elena, she's kind of boring, but as Catherine, she is amazing. And it's really insane. Half the time I forget it's the same actress, which is ridiculous because they obviously are identical characters. But half the time I forget that it's Nina Dobrev playing Catherine because she's just so good at it. She's just so tough, but she's physically strong as well. It's always fun to see her face off with other vampires and just completely decimate them. There's a great scene where she's literally going against both the Salvatore brothers, and she just wipes the floor with them and would have killed them in that moment if it weren't for her plan. And every time the characters think that they have one up on her, she pulls something out of thin air. And she's just, I think that by the end of it, so because she disappears from a series in season 5, even though Nina Dobrev is still there, I think it got too expensive to keep filming her and Elena together, because they'd have to refilm everything. So they did eventually write Catherine out. But the best part is, even though the Vampire Diaries definitely goes completely off the rails in the last 2 seasons, they actually bring Catherine back as the final boss, which I think is fantastic because she was the first big bad we ever heard of. She was the first legitimate threat to Elena, to the Salvatores. She's responsible for one of the main characters becoming a vampire. She's responsible for another main character becoming a werewolf. She's caused so much damage and so much carnage. And in season 5, she gets dragged off to hell. And then in season 8, you find out that when she was there, she kind of took over the place. So even when she's been banished to the worst of the worst, she still manages to come out on top. And I think that consummate survivor instinct, and the fact that she does have a tragic backstory, and the fact that she's just so much fun to watch, she always just makes the best of every situation. Anytime something happens, she kind of just takes it in stride and keeps going and keeps wreaking havoc. And again, a female villain, I just always love a good female villain. And when I first started watching the Vampire Diaries, before I even had figured out whether I liked the show, I had fallen in love with Catherine as a character. She was the first character that I fell in love with. She was originally my favorite character, and anytime I rewatch the show, she's just one of my favorite parts of it. So that's my number 2, Katerina Petrova, aka Catherine Pierce from the Vampire Diaries.
And you did a video, didn't you, about the twins on
yes,
your channel?
I did. I do. Yes, I have a video talking about her and Elena and how they're basically inverse mirrors of each other. And so everything about them, is either a mirror or an inverse, and it actually creates a beautiful symmetry between the 2 characters.
Okay, yeah. I'll probably stick that video actually in the top of this video, the sort video link part. Okay.
Thank you.
That's all right. Okay. So my number 2 is Gustavo Fring from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. So from both shows.
Yes,
Yeah,
I do. I haven't seen
a
them, but I do
crossover.
know the
But you
character
know
you're
who
talking
I'm
about.
talking about.
Absolutely. Yes, yes.
The chicken guy, as he's
Yes, the
sometimes known,
chicken
because
guy.
he
Yes.
runs a chicken business. So some great villains in what I guess you would say is now the Breaking Bad verse, because obviously crossover between the two shows, and Gus Fring's or Fring, sorry, plays a big role in both shows. And one of the things worth saying is that Better Call Saul is about to come to an end. The final episode airs this week, coming technically next week, but so we're on the final hurdle. And for those who follow the show, they know that the end of season 6 has featured so many back and forth flashbacks between the two sort of shows, and featuring stuff from the Breaking Bad timeline, if and in general, but also Gus being a good example of this. Then his sort of fate and his storylines between the two shows actually adds richness. It adds even more richness to sort of Breaking Bad, seeing his scenes in Better Call Saul. But he's a great villain, and one employs Jesse and Walter, the sort of main characters from Breaking Bad, to like cook drugs for him. He has a whole setup, like a whole like underground sort of base, which is like underground facility. I think it's like a laundry sort of place or something like that. But that's just a good example where you see that also you actually see how that place came to be, sort of thing. So just stuff like that. But yeah, just stuff like that. And Gus running the chicken place, as I said, he manages like this fast food outlet, and once again he is, presenting this sort of persona of this good, wholesome, family value sort of guy. He manages to be very grounded while being very threatening. He's an interesting like similarities to someone like the mayor. But one of the things I love about Gus is just how meticulous he is, just how cerebral he is, and how he thinks things through, where he just seems to have everything planned out in such great detail, to a point where you might think he's overdoing it a bit. But just what I love about him is the philosophy of how everything has to run like clockwork. And obviously, even though in a way his big operation is to do with the drugs and making money and that whole business, it's this idea that the which are used as like a cover for those business, they have to function and run just as effectively, because if something goes wrong, then the whole thing could sort of go wrong. So you just have these funny little examples where, like, he will, as the manager of the chicken place, he will actually serve customers and do his sort of bit. And there's something like quirky sort of comedy that comes from that. And you'll see him go to extremes where, he's always insisting on the perfect sort of cleanness at the chicken place. And there's just stuff like, for example, like in the final season, where, without going into too many spoilers, but there's been like an incident where he's been shot and he's been injured. But even in that state, he's still calling into the chicken. Like, he still calls like the assistant manager of the chicken place, and he's
dedication.
still, yeah, he's still, because he wants him to open up for him the next day, and he says, "I'm sort of going away for a few days on business. Can
That's
you run
good
the
stuff.
place while I'm not there?" But that just shows you the level of details he goes into. Then he has to make sure the chicken place is running efficiently in his absence. But he's a tremendous character, a lot of different layers. The actor's just tremendous, where he can be, can switch between being very innocent and quirky at times, but then having this cold sort of villain where, because there are like different sides of the villains and stuff, where at times you can certainly be more on his side, and he's a very engaging, charming character to be with, and at times, obviously, very sort of unpleasant. But I think for that sort of character in that sort of like seedy sort of world, he is like the most charming than you can expect that sort of character to be. And I like that side of him, but he's a very layered villain. Obviously, very important, and he's obviously like a character of color, and has such a big role on like one of the major TV shows, and obviously it's spin-off now. So many big scenes in both shows feature Gus, and it's just sort of funny watching the show because obviously, like, when you see him in Better Call Saul, you sort of already know his fate from Breaking Bad, and yet there's still so much tension to a lot of his scenes, and he's so good at coming up with like cunning plans and really well thought out plans, and you get to a certain scene and think, well, what's he going to do to sort of get out of this or counter this? It's always fascinating to see what he's going to do. Like comic book or like cartoon villain. An honourable mention was Evil Lynn from He-Man, because I absolutely love her laugh, and a more sort of campy villain. And personally, I find her a bit more interesting than Skeletor, who's a bit of an icon as well. But I just find her a little bit more malevolent and entertaining, quite sexy, obviously. But she has that evil sort of laugh about her, which is fantastic. So Evelyn has an honourable mention. Also honourable mention that you had on your list is Benjamin Linus from Lost. Love that. Once again, I was thinking maybe more of an anti-hero, but like you said, for a lot of his time on Lost, he is an outright villain as well. I definitely considered, and he's one of my favourite Lost characters. I love that. And another honourable mention I had, again from the Buffyverse, but this time from Angel, was Holtz, who's great. Tremendous character actor playing him, and again a villain with layers and with like real motivations, where there are moments where you do sympathise with him, even though he's going about things the wrong way.
As I mentioned, the mayor, because I do love the mayor from Buffy, just such a great villain, like you mentioned, so much fun. Also from the Buffyverse, I would also put Angelus as an honorable mention. I am currently watching season 2 of Buffy, and obviously we're going to get into this when we get into our Buffy discussions, but oh my god, I had forgotten how menacing Angelus is in season 2 of Buffy, and of course the personal link that he has with Buffy, being the evil inverse of Angel, just adds stakes to that. So definitely Angelus. As I mentioned, Lionel Luther from Smallville, who is the villain before Lex becomes the villain, played wonderfully by John Glover. He is so good in the role, lots of fun, very charismatic, a very fun character, and you can definitely see why Lex is the way he is when he comes from a man like that. And then my last villain that I'm going to mention is probably not a very well-known villain, because it's from a spin-off show that didn't last, which is Once Upon a Time in Wonderland, which is the spin-off from Once Upon a Time. Now, that only ran for one season, but they did their own version of the Jabberwocky. Now, the Jabberwocky is a poem that's from Alice in Wonderland. The creature itself has featured in a few different versions of Wonderland. In the TV show, the Jabberwocky is a woman, and her magic or her trick is that she violates your mind and makes you relive your worst fears and your worst traumas. And she is incredibly creepy. The actress who plays her is an Australian actress. She is so good in the role, and she's just really sinister and really unsettling. And I think if the show had run for longer, it could have been really interesting to find out her backstory. So those are my honorable mentions. And now we have arrived at number one. So my number one is a female villain from the Buffyverse. I have gone with Angel, and my number one villain is the fantastic Lila Morgan, because she is just an absolute magnificent bitch. I loved Lila Morgan from the second she walked on screen in Angel. Everything about Lila is fantastic. First of all, I love the fact that she doesn't have a tragic villain story, you know? She doesn't have a Freudian excuse. She's not conflicted like Lindsay is. Lila Morgan knows that she wants money and she wants power, and she doesn't care who she has to step on to get that. She, like she says to Angel, that mask that he talks about, she became that years ago. She knows exactly who she is, and she doesn't have any qualms. There are so many times when Angel tries to like talk her out of being evil, or they try to like give her the speech of like, you could be good, and she's like, hell no, I serve one person, me, and I don't have any warm and fuzzy for you people, and I'm not gonna buy into your whole morality game. I love that she has a bit of a journey. You know, when we first meet her, she is a bit of a sycophantic, you know, lower level employee at Wolfram and Hart. Obviously, they're a bit more invested in Lindsay than they are in her. She obviously makes some mistakes, but I love seeing her grow and evolve to the point that she cuts Linwood's head off. Like, that is just such a power move. That moment where she decides to just alter some furniture and just take the head off, and just everything about her is so fierce and so in control. And Stephanie Romanov obviously must have had so much fun playing that role, because Lila is such a fierce bitch, and I love watching her dynamic with Angel investigations, with Angel himself. Obviously her relationship with Wesley later on opens up a side to her that we haven't seen, but I like that even that relationship doesn't soften her to the degree that you would normally see in this kind of show, you know? She's still evil. She still takes information that Wesley feeds her unintentionally and takes it and uses it to, you know, to do her evil deeds. But she does have some really sweet moments with Wes, and I particularly love the end of season 4 when he tries to burn her contract, and they have that little kind of understanding between them when he realizes that she won't be free of Wolfram and Hart. She also gets some of the funniest and best lines in the series. You know, she has that snark and she just never lets go. Even after she comes back from the dead and she's like offering them Wolfram and Hart, she's all like, because you ended world peace. And Fred's like, no, we didn't. And Lila's just like, yeah, you kind of did. I really wish they'd brought her back for season 5. I think she could have been like their liaison to the senior partners, and it would have been so much better than Eve. Cordelia calling Eve Lila Jr. is one of the biggest insults to Lila's character ever, because there is no way that Eve could even like step into one of Lila's Manolo Blahniks. It's just not going to happen. So Lila is just everything I want in a female villain. She's unapologetic. She's fierce. She knows who she is. She's evil as fuck, man. Like, some of the shit she does to Angel investigations is so messed up, and you still love her because she is just so brilliant. So no villain will ever beat Lila Morgan, at least not in my book. So she is my number one of our top TV villains.
Yeah, that's a great choice. I can totally get behind that. She definitely has one of the most intriguing arcs on the show. So well played. And she fits so well into that universe, because Angel, especially those early seasons, feels like a noir style show.
Yes,
so
definitely.
She has the whole femme fatale thing going for her. But great character, and I think does go to really dark places. It's interesting to see. And when we talk about the show eventually, it'll be interesting to discuss those moments where maybe the mask slips a little and she has like moments of humanity, but there's some really dark and intriguing stuff with Lila, and as you said, towards the end of her run, some moving stuff as well. But great character, great performance. I mean, the actress has never really done anything like that before.
Not really.
She's criminally underrated. I mean, I'm surprised, based on that role, then she didn't get more bigger roles.
I know, right? You would think that you'd see her in more, but it is.
So.
You know, she was in a very short-lived spin-off from Melrose Place called Models Incorporated.
Models Inc.
Yeah,
I used to watch that. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, wow. Just 90s shit. Yeah. So I didn't know she was in that, but
very cool.
It's always funny, you know. so different to Lila. So there
Yeah.
you go. Yeah, she's one of my favourite characters out of Angel and a tremendous villain. So I totally on board with that. So my number one, it's also another female villain, and it's from a very recent show, actually. It's a show which only ended this year, the final season. And so my choice is, for number one, is Wendy Bird from Ozark. So that's the Laura Linney.
Laura Linney's character.
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't seen it, but I have heard about it, so this will be interesting.
Okay, so Laura Linney, one of my favourite actresses, great actress. Anything she's in, she's great. Even if the thing itself isn't very good, she still makes it worth watching. Plays a lot of different roles, but just has this really down and dirty bad side to her. Just this very dominating sort of charisma about her, where she can play these very manipulated, seedy, underhanded sort of characters. Similar maybe to someone like Lila, where she is very sort of brash about it, very upfront about it, about the way like this character at times uses sexuality, and about the way she's very honest about where she wants to be and her sort of worldview. But what's interesting about the character is then Ozark obviously is largely a satire about money laundering, about these characters who middle class family, but to a certain extent very modest sort of family at the start of the show, and they just it's almost sort of bad luck where the Jason Bateman character gets caught up with this cartel and money laundering through his sort of ex-partner. As a setup for the theme of the show, that then it is like these everyday people getting put in this extreme situation, and over the course of the show they are corrupted by power and money. And it's that classic sort of thing where there are times where they could get out of it, and it's just so cringeworthy, so painful to watch them making decisions that prevent them from getting out of it.
Yeah.
But the point I was making is that at the very start of the show, if you were to say there's going to be like a villain of the show from like the main characters, you actually would have said it's the Bateman character. Like in that first episode, you would have said his wife, played by Laura Linney, is the more sort of sympathetic. But over the course of the show, Wendy just has this tremendous arc where she gradually gets more power. She gradually gets more involved in these things because they have to like scout out these various sort of businesses around this town. And she just slowly gets her fingers in more pies, and because she has this interesting past in politics where like the character, obviously in the story of the show, like worked for like the Obama administration, and the politics and their political views sort of slowly like plays into that. But then from that moment where she was actually passed over, like she lost her job because she wasn't seen as, being like not on the cutting edge of sort of thing, then that's a moment that actually made her very bitter. And in some ways that seeds what we see later on with the character, where it's almost a little bit like someone like Lila, her worldview, where it's almost like, well, I keep getting screwed over by the world. And I mean, obviously with Lila, we don't know if she ever sort of was that on the level, but it's almost this idea that these characters have sometimes where, playing by the rules, playing by the book just doesn't work for me. I just get screwed over, I get overlooked. So there's definitely an element of that with Wendy, which motivates her later. The nature and how she manipulates things just grows and grows. And it is a satire, so at times it's very entertaining to watch. There's some entertaining scenes of her being sort of a bitch, but she really does some despicable, underhanded things. There's a great storyline where her daughter, who's just sick of like the lifestyle and what's going on with the family, wants out of it, just wants like emancipation, like legally, and just the lengths that Wendy goes to because part of the thing is that she's worried about what the daughter might say if she's not around the family and stuff. So just the levels Wendy goes to try and keep the daughter in the family, like. And then there's stuff with the son where at one point, because the son is sort of like a computer hacker, and at one point he works for like a rival of them, and there's just this rivalry that grows, like where Wendy sort of like drives him away, or just does everything in her power to like shut down what he's doing, like helping the other side, and to the point where she's almost willing to like send him to jail as like a delinquent sort of thing. And it's those sort of scenes where it really shows like the level of this woman, because like the Marty, the husband played by Bateman, or just be saying, really, you're really willing to do this to our son, sort of thing, and you'll get her trying to justify it. You'll get her saying thing, well, you know full well, like at his age, his record will be expunged and he won't serve any real time. So she tries to come up with these excuses, but she's a really scary character, the way she develops. She has this tremendous arc. She does become almost like a machine. Like, there's a lot of entertaining dialogue, like so well delivered by Laura Linney, and it's a fascinating but also scary character to watch. Like the end of the show, I mean, sort of in the last couple of episodes, sort of thing, but like there's a storyline where she books herself into like a mental institution, and there's a whole plot, like a whole motivation for the reason she's done it. And once again, she's very good at like emotional sort of blackmail with other characters, and it's just that sort of thing where like, she really will stoop to any sort of level to get away. But also there's like fascinating like human side to her at times. There's stuff where I think at the very least she believes that there's certain things she's doing for like good causes, because obviously in many ways they are like, we're in this situation, but there's this great opportunity to make money, which they take too far stuff. And it's again that frustration thing of they do get corrupted by greed. They've come from very modest like circumstances, and that's the whole point of the show, to do with capitalism, the way it can grip you, where you'll keep saying to yourself, well, we'll just make enough money so that we can get out of this life and live comfortably. But it's that thing, it's never enough. You keep craving for it. But there are certain circumstances where she'll sort of justify some of what she's doing by saying, we'll support this person with the money we're making. So at widow of like basically the storyline is then her husband has like committed suicide, and it's largely because of the pressure put on him by the Birds, where they've sort of like got some dirt on him and sort of like forced him into a position. And it's basically to get like a political vote to them, but also to make them look bad in public. And Wendy sort of talks her out of it by promising like a foundation for like mental health and sort of suicide if she doesn't. So it's one of those where I think there is a little bit of that in the character's mind, where she justified some of this by Linny. And at times although it is, as I said, one of the protagonists of the show, at times she does get to be a full-on villain, and is such a scary character to watch. But that's Wendy Bird on Ozark.
Very cool. That's a show that another one I've been meaning to watch for ages. My sister's been telling me to watch it for ages, and I do love Laura Linney. Like she's, like you said, she's
awesome.
always good. No matter what she's in, it's always good stuff. But, very cool. So we only had one crossover there. I had a feeling it was going to be Kimberly Shaw. Like when we started, I was like, I bet you both of us will have Kimberly because we have spoken about her before. And I was, like I said, I thought you'd have a Twin Peaks one, and I thought there'd be at least one Buffy villain in there, but I wasn't sure who you were going to go with. So very cool.
So we want your list as well. It doesn't have to be a full 10, but if you've got a full 10, then post them in the comments of the video, or just say some of your favorites. Comment on some of our picks as well, and also comment what future lists you would like to see, because we normally alternate. We normally do a TV list then a film list, but we have some planned for the future, but we're also open to suggestions. So let us know any future lists you would like to see. Like and subscribe as always, and share us out on social media. Support me on Patreon, patreon.com/boardnow for some extra perks. You can also make a donation to PayPal. Rachel, if you want to promote your channel.
Guys, you can follow me, Rachel Macdonald, video essays on TV shows and movies. My Tumblr and Twitter are also on my YouTube. You can find them in the About section, and Keith usually puts a link in the description. So come and follow me everywhere.
Okay, thanks, guys. Yeah, keep watching TV, keep watching slimy, villainous characters and enjoying them, or wincing at times. But thanks for listening. We'll be back with more soon. Goodbye.